Hey Deckers, and welcome to Dune Awakening on the Steam Deck. Huge thanks to Funcom for giving me early access to this and also being able to bring in a buddy to play through this, as this is definitely not a single player friendly game, although it will be able to be played single player. There is so many aspects to this, and performance, as you can see, can be a little bit tricky. Although we don't know what the official status on the Steam Deck will be, I do think it is playable. There are some compromises, and don't forget you are only seeing an 800p image, which would be blown up if you're looking on a larger screen, so bear that in mind. And you're seeing one of the first bugs that was fortunately fixed during this stage, and you'll see that in action a little bit later. I'm very glad that this was delayed a month, and there is a huge beta coming up, so keep your eye out for that, and I'll share some more information on that in just a minute. Settings wise on the Steam Deck though, we have got quite good control, but for this we are going to be running at 800p and with motion blur off. Frame rate cap in game, I'm just going to leave off for this, but we do want to switch it to that full screen mode, but we do want to also cap it to 45 in game, but we will cap that to 30 on the Steam Deck if we want better processing. Everything else pretty much on low, but we are going to tweak the anti-aliasing up a little bit. And we do have some controller funkiness in this at the moment, but FSR3 on balance is pretty much where we need to be. We can bring that anti-aliasing up a little bit though, to high, just to smooth things out somewhat, and we do get a pretty decent playthrough with these settings. When the full game releases, I will definitely look at this again, especially as there was that extra month and we've got this other beta coming up. So performance that you're seeing in this video will probably not be true to what we're going to experience on day one or in that open beta, as quite a lot was fixed and the embargo on this was quite long. So the servers are now shut down from our creator preview, but it is definitely worth having a look at. Frame generation with such low frame rate is just a no-go on the Steam Deck, especially as we're barely holding 30 frames per second a lot of the time. If you do enable frame gen at this low, it just introduces a ton of input latency. As you can see from this base, this is actually one of my early bases, and you'll see a much more advanced one in a minute. Everything is centered around water and blood. You do need to obviously take blood from your enemies so that you can extract water and survive. Now the big beta is coming on May the 9th, and it's going to be able to experience the first 20 to 25 hours of and Act 1 of the story. You'll be able to get through the Hagar Basin South region, which is where that first base is, as well as the Eastern and Western Vermilius Gap regions with the Sandbike, which is what you'll see coming up on my larger base. And once the full game releases, there's going to be 9 more regions, as well as the full story with tons more content to come. So here you can see my kind of second main base in the Eastern Vermilius Gap region, which is a heat biome, so things really do heat up quite quickly. So having either a still suit or just plenty of water cans really makes a big difference. There's quite a few kind of real-time events that happen in-game, which is what you've seen it here, but you do have to watch out for that sandworm. Now that worm is ruthless, and if you do get caught by it, you lose absolutely everything. Though it does look absolutely gorgeous when it does pop out, and you do feel like you can bait it sometimes into where you're going to be able to get it to go, but be warned, if it does lock onto you, there is no escape. So once you do see it appear, make your exit. So you can see it's making its way over here, and I do have a dash ability before it's quite fully locked onto me. So I was able to escape, but we do have a few close calls, and I have been swallowed by this worm a few times, and it does mean pretty much starting over. So you do need a decent amount of stuff in your base. You'll also notice around the base there is a ton of chests. You need lots and lots of storage management because you need lots of things to be able to build stuff later on, as well as managing obviously spare weapons and other spare bits and pieces in case you do end up either eaten by the worm or you just die to things like the outlaws and other enemies as well. Everything is really controller friendly, though there were a few bugs in the early stages. So you will be able to manage all of this via the Steam Deck's native controls or an external controller if you prefer. There is only around, you can only have 8 things mapped on your quick loadout, and that's not always enough. So you will lose some inventory space to things like your water, blood packs, and other bits and pieces. that you will want on you all of the time, but do make sure that you store stuff in chests, because if you do lose it out in the sand, there's pretty much no recovery. You can see that also we got full mappings for our character on our armor sets and a few extra things that we can bolt onto the belts. Now you'll notice that at the moment I'm not wearing a belt, and that's very important, because if you don't have something like a suspensor belt, then you will get full damage, and you'll see later on why that's very important. So if you can get a suspensor belt, make sure you get one as early as possible. You will spend a lot of time making things though, and obviously refining water and other bits and pieces, and managing your power as well as that water resource. There is so much stuff to build and craft and manage in this game. It does feel a bit overwhelming at first, but once you get things up and running, it's actually incredibly rewarding. Heal kits though are incredibly expensive compared to things like bandages, so make sure that you keep a decent stock of those on you at all times. As you can see from the map area, that Hagen Basin South is where you kind of start off, and I went up into Eastern Vermilius Gap to start building this base area, and you'll notice that we essentially have a massive sandstorm blocking all of the view. You need to get up really high to deploy things like sensor drones, which can be a little bit challenging, especially if you've forgotten to put on a suspensor belt and you end up falling quite away. And there's also a grappling hook, which I didn't find out until quite a few hours into the game, as an ability which really makes this process a lot easier. So keep your eye out for that skill. Again, we only have 2 skills for quite a lot of the early game, so you do have to swap things out depending on whether you're going into combat or whether you're doing a bit more of exploration. Climbing takes a bit of getting used to, especially when you do get that grappling hook, and climbing down is much more precarious, hence why you need something like a suspensor belt. Once you do get up high enough though, you can deploy something called a survey probe, and then it will take a bit of time and then reveal the map. There is some big storms that can occur though that will reset the map, so don't think that once you've deployed a sensor drone that you will forever see what's going on that section of the map. It's always good to have a friend with you as well, as funny enough, by the time we got up here, my buddy realized that he had actually forgotten his sensor probe, so fortunately I had a spare. Now you can see we do get a bit of lag moving around the map. There's so much stuff's going on there, but we do have full trade abilities and being able to drop stuff off, so he was able to get that as well. The day-night cycle in this game is absolutely phenomenal, and you can see here, once you've got that grappling hook, climbing can be a little bit easier as long as you get the dodge and grab right. But the real-time shadow movement and the change of the environment, as well as the lighting effects, is just absolutely phenomenal. So this was sunrise. You can see obviously things start getting very hot, and if I get right up to the top, you'll see the desert start coming on fire. As I said, this area is a heat biome section, so it is increased heat compared to some of the other areas, hence the darker red sand and things looking like they're on fire quite a lot of the time. Transition to nighttime though with the sunset is just as epic, and obviously we get these real-time shadows, especially when you're up high. So obviously I'm burning here because I've been in the sun for so long, but just as it goes behind a tower, you'll see just getting a bit of shadow on you will cool you right down very quickly, and then obviously I'm back in the sun, so it starts heating up again. But as that sun really goes down, we also get some of the reverse effects from the worm. As I said, you get some of those quick time events of things like engines crashing for you to salvage, and the worm will eventually just eat them. If you're on top of them when that happens, you do get eaten alive, so beware of that. If you're salvaging, he will come out for it sooner, but after a while it essentially just does a cleanup and it will clear it off the map. As you've seen throughout this though, I am dipping into the low 20s on occasion, but most of the time I'm not really moving around and it's not too bad anyway, just enjoying the environment. But that transition to night and day is absolutely fantastic. Obviously traversing around at night is going to be when most people are active because of the reduced heat, which means we don't have to drink as much water, but being out at night also comes with its own challenges. As that nighttime approaches, you'll see some big ships come out and they start scanning through the night. If you get caught by one of these ships, it blocks you in a kind of tractor beam and then deploys some elite units to come down and shoot you, which once you get a bit adept at fighting is actually quite useful if you're low on blood or water, because it gives you some free people to drain regardless of where you are as far as civilization or camps are concerned. As I said, without Sensor Belt, getting down can be a little bit tricky, but once you've got one, it does this lovely effect which basically prevents all fall damage once you reach a kind of high velocity, which would normally hurt you, but fall damage isn't too bad overall. Not only do we have all the mechanics of just crafting, but maintaining and managing your Sandbike is also quite involved, and there are some quite cool looking vehicles in the later stages of the game once you unlock some more kind of minerals. But being able to switch between inventory, somebody else being on the back of your bike, or having a speed boost really changes things up. But again, inventory management is a huge thing, so most of the time you will have a extra inventory slot on the back of your bike, and being able to store it with this backup tool really changes the game, because if you are going into caves and precarious areas, you don't have to remember where you left your bike. Unfortunately, that doesn't work if you do have stuff in your inventory on the back of the bike though, so bear that in mind. If you are going on long exploration, either remember where you parked it or take the inventory off so that you can then store it and deploy it wherever you need. All of these changes though require manual changes. As you can see, you have to remove a module and then add it with a specific section, as well as upgrading and maintaining your bike out and about. So make sure you've always got some wire and a welding torch on you once you get your Sandbike. Of course, moving across the desert is making things precarious as far as that worm's concerned, although it does seem less active at night. If you are traveling across open desert, the Sandbike attracts him very, very quickly. So it's bad enough running across these open distances, but if you are on a Sandbike, expect to see them very soon. Combat has been exceptionally good, apart from that early bug with the teleport skill if you do go with the voice aspect. Once that's fixed, it does make things very simple. Now, charging into battle is often a good way to die in this one, so having a teammate or two definitely makes things easier, or going a much more stealthy path, because they can distract while you teleport behind. Because once somebody else notices, you get ganged up on, and a lot of the time they have shields, so it is quite difficult to just solo through a lot of these areas. Once you do get used to things though, and you are able to heal up quite quickly, it can be very rewarding, but often will lead to a quick death. All of these areas though generally have tons of loot, again where that inventory management is going to come into play, as well as lore and other bits and pieces spaced out, and special intelligence in certain areas, as well as certain caves for special materials. Makes things a little bit more dynamic of where we got to pick things up and how we get those resources, as well as not just picking up everything everywhere, because you'll get overloaded very quickly. Performance wise though, no real issues with combat. It's just a case of getting used to the way your characters and specials interact with each other, and making sure that you don't take on more than you need to. Once you get things like the weapons that also take blood, and getting used to water management, it's an extremely rewarding game, and an extremely big game at that. I spent around 20 to 25 hours in game, with most of that on the Steam Deck to get a lot of this footage and get a decent feel for the game, so I'm very confident that this is going to come out in a pretty good state when it's actually released. Hopefully we'll see you guys in the open beta weekend, and we'll see a lot of those issues resolved. I do think that beta is going to highlight some issues with lots of players on the servers though, as during the creator preview obviously it's not been that crowded, and performance has still been a little bit flaky at times, especially around some of the player hub areas. So having so many people online in these servers, especially around the earlier areas, will be very interesting. Thanks again to Funcom for letting me have this early and being able to dive in and play on the deck. Let us know in the comments below if you're looking forward to this one and what type of character you're going to be building, as there is so much to choose from. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.